By the time Denise Caldwell stood in front of the whole neighborhood and called my grandfather's flag an eyesore, I had already paid $400 in fines, answered 2 city complaints, and watched 3 neighbors who once waved at me turn their faces away like I had brought shame to the street. But the worst part was not the money. It was the way she smiled when she said, "Some people confuse memories with property violations." That was the moment I knew this was not about a flag anymore. Before I tell you how things got that bad, let me know where you are listening from. And if you have ever dealt with an HOA, a difficult neighbor, a landlord, or a community board that went too far, share your experience in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me, because this neighborhood drama started with one old flag and turned into something nobody saw coming. I moved into my grandfather's house on a cloudy Friday morning in early April. The neighborhood was called Willow Creek Estates, though there was no creek, and nothing about it felt like an estate. It was a quiet suburb outside Raleigh, North Carolina, with trimmed lawns, white mailboxes, 2-car garages, and people who noticed everything before you even carried your first box through the door. My grandfather, Henry Reed, had lived in that house for 40 years. He was not a rich man. He was not loud. He wore the same brown work boots until the soles almost gave out, drank black coffee from a chipped mug, and believed a man's word still meant something. Every morning, rain or shine, he walked to the front yard and raised his American flag on the old metal pole beside the porch. That flag had faded from years of sun. The red stripes were dull. The white was no longer bright. The edge had a small tear my grandfather had carefully stitched by hand. To anybody else, it probably looked old. To me, it looked like him. When he died, the house came to me. I was his only grandson, and honestly, I almost sold it. I had my own apartment, my own problems, and enough grief sitting on my chest to make every room feel heavy. But the first time I opened his front door after the funeral, the place still smelled like cedar, coffee, and old books. I found his jacket hanging by the back door. His reading glasses sat on the kitchen table, and outside, the flag rope tapped softly against the pole in the wind. That sound broke me. So I stayed. On my second day there, while I was pulling weeds near the driveway, a silver SUV slowed down in front of the house. The driver's window rolled down, and a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair leaned out like she had been waiting for the right moment. "You must be Marcus," she said. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I'm Denise Caldwell, president of the Willow Creek HOA. I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was, well, he was here a long time." The pause before "well" told me more than her words did. "Thank you," I said. Her eyes moved past me to the flag. "I wanted to introduce myself and also let you know we take curb appearance very seriously here." I looked back at the house. The grass was a little high, a few bushes needed trimming, the paint on the porch rail was peeling, nothing terrible, but not perfect either. "I'm working on it," I said. "I just moved in." "Of course," Denise said. "We give new homeowners grace. But some things need immediate attention." She pointed toward the flag. "That should come down." I thought I misheard her. "The flag. The condition of it," she said. "It's weathered. Faded. It gives the property a neglected look." I let out a small laugh, because I honestly thought she was joking. She did not laugh with me. "My grandfather raised that flag every day for 40 years, I said. "And that is very sentimental," she replied. "But sentiment does not override HOA standards." I stared at her for a second, waiting for some sign of kindness to appear. It never did. "I'm not taking it down," I said. Her smile tightened. "Well," she said, "then I'll send you the rulebook so you can review it properly." She rolled up the window and drove off slowly, like she wanted every house on the street to see that she had spoken to me. That evening I found the HOA rulebook in my mailbox. It was thick, stapled, and full of highlighted sections. Someone had circled one line in blue ink. All exterior displays must be maintained in clean, attractive, and approved condition. Below it, Denise had written a note. "Please correct within 7 days." I threw the paper on the kitchen counter and tried to ignore it. For the next few days, I focused on the house. I mowed the lawn. I painted the porch rail. I fixed a loose shutter. I cleaned out the gutters. Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly widow across the street, watched from her front window most mornings. On the 4th day, She came over with a foil-covered plate of tamales and a nervous smile. "You look like Henry when you work," she said. That made my throat tighten. "You knew my grandfather well?" She looked at the flag, then back at me. Everybody knew Henry. Before I could ask what she meant, her face changed. She glanced toward the corner house where Denise lived. "Be careful with that woman," Mrs. Alvarez whispered. "With Denise?" She nodded. "She likes people quiet." Then she pressed the plate into my hands and hurried back across the street before I could ask anything else. The first fine came 3 days later. $50. The letter said I had failed to correct an exterior display violation. I called the number on the notice. Denise answered herself. "Marcus," she said, like she had been expecting me. "I assume this is about the flag." "It's an American flag," I said. "On private property. I'm not running a junkyard." "No one said you were," she replied calmly. "But the board has rules." "What board?" "I haven't met any board." "You will," she said, "if you continue refusing simple cooperation." The way she said cooperation made it sound like obedience. By the end of the next week, 2 more fines came. Then a warning about my trash bins being visible from the street, even though they were behind the side gate. Then a notice about my mailbox paint, even though half the mailboxes on the block looked worse than mine. That was when I understood. She was not enforcing rules. She was hunting for reasons. One Saturday morning, while I was replacing a cracked stepping stone near the porch, a man in a golf shirt stopped on the sidewalk. "You Marcus Reed?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Tom Braddock, HOA treasurer." He looked uncomfortable, like someone had sent him, but he wished they had picked anybody else. "Denise wants this settled before the monthly meeting," he said. "Just take the flag down, replace it with a new one, and move on." "I never said I wouldn't replace it eventually," I said, "but I'm not taking it down because she talks to me like my grandfather was trash." Tom looked at the flag, then lowered his voice. "Henry was a decent man," he said. "Then why is everybody acting scared to say that?" Tom's jaw moved, but no words came out. A black sedan turned onto the street. Tom saw it and stepped back from my driveway, like he had been caught stealing. "Just be careful," he muttered. Then he walked away. That night, I went into the garage looking for a screwdriver and found an old wooden box pushed behind a stack of paint cans. It was covered in dust, with my grandfather's initials burned into the lid. HR. The lock was small and rusted. I almost left it alone, but something about Mrs. Alvarez's warning and Tom's nervous face stayed in my mind. I broke the lock with a hammer. Inside were old photographs, yellowed letters, folded maps, and a thick envelope marked in my grandfather's handwriting. "Willow Creek, original land agreement, do not throw away." My hands went still. I opened the envelope and pulled out a faded document from 1983. At the top were signatures, county stamps, and the name of the neighborhood before it became Willow Creek Estates. Then, I saw my grandfather's name, Henry Reed, not as a resident, not as a witness, as one of the original landowners. Before I could read the rest, headlights swept across the garage wall. A car had stopped in front of my house. I stepped outside with the document still in my hand and saw Denise Caldwell walking up my driveway with 2 police officers behind her. She pointed at the flag and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "That is the violation, and I want it removed tonight." The 2 police officers looked almost as uncomfortable as I felt. Denise Caldwell stood at the edge of my driveway with her arms crossed, her silver necklace shining under the porch light like she had dressed for a victory. Behind her, curtains moved in 3 different houses. People were watching. Not openly, not bravely, but enough for me to feel the whole street holding its breath. One officer, a tall man with tired eyes, stepped forward. "Sir, are you Marcus Reed?" "Yes," I said, still holding the old document in one hand. "We got a call about a disturbance and a possible safety violation." I looked past him at Denise. "A disturbance?" Denise lifted her chin. "Repeated refusal to comply with community regulations can become a public safety concern." The second officer glanced at the flagpole, then back at her. "Ma'am, we're not here to enforce HOA rules." Her smile dropped for half a second. "I understand that," she said quickly. "But that flag is damaged. If it tears loose or the pole falls..." "The pole has been standing longer than most of us have lived here," I said. The first officer raised a hand. "Everybody take a breath." He turned to me. "Sir, unless there's an immediate danger, We can't make you remove a flag from your property tonight. Denise's face hardened. But the HOA has authority, she said. Then handle it through your civil process, the officer replied. For the first time since she had pulled up, Denise looked embarrassed. Not defeated, but embarrassed. And I learned something important about her that night. Denise Caldwell could handle being disliked. She could handle being feared, but she could not handle looking powerless in public. She stepped closer to me and lowered her voice. You are making a mistake. I looked at the old envelope in my hand. Maybe, but not the one you think. Her eyes dropped to the papers. For just a moment, something moved across her face. It was not anger. It was recognition. You should be careful digging through things you don't understand, she said. Then she turned and walked back to her car. The police officers left soon after. One of them told me to document everything and talk to a lawyer if the fines kept coming. That was good advice, but lawyers cost money I did not have. My grandfather's house needed repairs. My job at the warehouse barely covered my bills, and the fines were starting to feel like a hand around my neck. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and spread the documents out under the yellow light. There were maps of the original land. There were letters from the county. There were old meeting notes from the early 1980s, back when Willow Creek was not a polished HOA neighborhood, but a patch of family-owned land surrounded by woods and narrow roads. My grandfather's name appeared again and again, Henry Reed. I found one letter from a county official thanking him for donating part of his land for road access. Another letter mentioned that several families had been allowed to build homes because my grandfather and 2 other landowners agreed not to block development. Then I found something that made me sit back in my chair. A handwritten agreement said that the Reed property would keep historical frontage rights and that no future neighborhood association shall interfere with established patriotic display, access, or boundary features existing at the time of development. I read that line 4 times. Patriotic display. I looked out the kitchen window at the flag. My grandfather had not just raised it because he loved the country. He had protected it on paper. The next morning, I went to the county records office before work. A woman named Janet helped me search through old property files. She looked bored at first, but when I showed her my grandfather's documents, her eyebrows lifted. Haven't seen one of these in years, she said. What exactly is it? She adjusted her glasses. Old development agreement. These can still matter, depending on how the HOA was formed. Can the HOA ignore it? Janet gave me the kind of look adults give when they know the world is not fair, but still believe paperwork matters. They can try, she said, but they may not want to if this is recorded properly. Then she printed a copy of a county record that showed my grandfather's agreement had been filed before the HOA was created. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small amount of hope. That hope lasted until I got home. A bright orange notice was taped to my front door. Hearing notice. Special HOA board meeting. Denise had called a special meeting for Monday night. The subject line read, Ongoing violations, community appearance, and possible legal action against Lot 17. Lot 17, not Marcus Reed, not Henry Reed's house. Just Lot 17, like the home my grandfather loved, was nothing but a problem on a map. Before I could even pull the notice down, Mrs. Alvarez came across the street. She moved slowly, gripping her cardigan closed against the wind. She came by today, Mrs. Alvarez said. Denise? She nodded. She told me not to get involved. My stomach tightened. Why would she say that to you? Mrs. Alvarez looked toward Denise's house, then whispered, Because I know what your grandfather did. I stepped closer. Then tell me. Her eyes filled with fear and sadness at the same time. Henry saved my home, she said. Mine and others. Years ago. Before this place looked like this, some people wanted families like mine pushed out. Your grandfather stopped it. I waited, but she shook her head. I can't say more out here. Come inside, I said. She hesitated. Then a garage door opened down the street. Denise's silver SUV backed out slowly. Mrs. Alvarez froze. Denise did not drive away. She just sat there, watching us. Mrs. Alvarez stepped back from me. Not now. Mrs. Alvarez, I'm sorry, she whispered. I have lived here too long to lose everything now. Then she hurried home. At the Monday night meeting, the clubhouse was packed. More people came than I expected. Some looked curious. Some looked annoyed. A few looked ashamed, but still refused to meet my eyes. Denise sat at the front table with 2 board members beside her. Tom Braddock was there too, staring down at his papers. Denise opened the meeting with a calm voice. "We are here because one homeowner has repeatedly refused to follow the same standards everyone else respects." Murmurs moved through the room. She clicked a remote, and a photo of my house appeared on a screen. The old flag was circled in red. My face burned. Then another photo appeared. My trash bins. Then my mailbox. Then my porch before I painted it. She had built a whole case against me. "This is not about patriotism," Denise said. "This is about rules. Without rules, a community falls apart." A man in the back called out, "Just put up a new flag, buddy." Someone else said, "We all have to follow the rules." I stood up slowly. "My grandfather followed rules," I said. "He also helped build this neighborhood." Denise gave a soft laugh. "Marcus, with respect, grief can make family stories feel bigger than they are." That was when I pulled out the county record. The room quieted. "This is not a family story," I said. "It's filed with the county." Tom's head snapped up. Denise's eyes locked on the paper in my hand. For the first time, I saw real fear in her face. Before I could read it aloud, the clubhouse doors opened. A man in a dark suit walked in carrying a folder. He walked straight to Denise, leaned down, and whispered something in her ear. Her face went pale. Then the man turned toward me and said, "Mr. Reed, I represent the development group that has an active interest in your property. We need to speak before you say another word." The room went silent so fast I could hear the old air conditioner humming above the clubhouse door. The man in the dark suit stood between me and Denise like he had walked into a courtroom instead of an HOA meeting. He was tall, clean-shaven, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from being paid to scare people politely. Denise touched the papers in front of her, but her hand was shaking. "Mr. Reed," the man said, "my name is Alan Mercer. I represent Westbrook Residential Partners." I looked around the room. "And why is a development company at an HOA meeting about my grandfather's flag?" Nobody answered. That told me more than any explanation could. Alan cleared his throat. "There are ongoing discussions involving certain properties in Willow Creek. Your lot has been identified as my home," I said. He paused. "Yes, your home. It has been identified as important to a future improvement plan." A woman in the front row leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Improvement plan." Denise quickly stood up. "This is not the time to discuss unrelated business." "It sounds related to me," I said. Tom Braddock, the HOA treasurer, pushed his chair back. His face had gone red, and for once, he looked more angry than afraid. "Denise," he said quietly, "you told us this was only about violations." "It is," she snapped. Tom looked at Alan Mercer. "Then why is he here?" The room shifted. Neighbors who had come ready to judge me were now turning toward the front table. Denise felt it. You could see it in the way she straightened her back and tried to take control again. "Marcus Reed has repeatedly ignored HOA standards," she said. "That is the issue." "No," I said, holding up the county record. "The issue is that you wanted me pressured out before I found out what my grandfather protected." Denise laughed, but it sounded thin. "Protected? Marcus, please. This is exactly the kind of emotional confusion I was talking about." I unfolded the old agreement and placed it on the table in front of her. "Then read it." She did not touch it, so I read it aloud. The words were old and formal, but everybody understood the important part. My grandfather, Henry Reed, had donated land for road access when Willow Creek was being developed. Without that road access, half the neighborhood could not have been built. In return, the Reed property kept special frontage rights, boundary protections, and the right to maintain the patriotic display already standing on the property. The flagpole, the same flagpole Denise had tried to force me to remove. When I finished reading, nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Mrs. Alvarez stood up in the back. She was small, nervous, and holding her purse against her chest with both hands. But her voice, when it came, was stronger than I expected. "Henry Reed did more than donate land," she said. Denise turned sharply. "Rosa, sit down." Mrs. Alvarez flinched, but she did not sit. "No," she said. "I have been quiet too long." Every head turned toward her. She looked at me, and her eyes filled with tears. "Years ago, before this neighborhood became what it is now, some families were going to be pushed out. My husband and I were one of them. So were the Millers, the Johnsons, 2 other families who had nowhere else to go. She pointed toward the old map on the table. Henry Reed refused to sign the final agreement unless those families were protected. He said a neighborhood built by throwing people away was not a neighborhood worth building. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I had known my grandfather was good. I had not known he was that brave. Mrs. Alvarez continued. That flag was not just decoration. He raised it every morning because he said this country only means something when ordinary people are treated with dignity. The room was quiet now for a different reason. Shame. Tom stood next. I saw the development proposal, he said. Denise's eyes widened. Tom. No, he said. They offered the HOA a private beautification fund if certain lots became available. Lot 17 was one of them. A man in the second row stood up. You mean she was fining him to make him sell? Denise slammed her palm on the table. That is a disgusting accusation. Alan Mercer closed his folder. My client had no knowledge of improper enforcement. Of course they didn't, someone muttered. Then another neighbor spoke up. She fined my daughter for a wheelchair ramp last year. The room stirred. A retired man near the aisle said, She made me repaint my fence twice, but Frank's fence on her side of the street was worse. Because Frank donated to her campaign for board president, another woman said. Denise's face hardened. This meeting is out of order. No, Tom said. For the first time, it's honest. He turned to the board secretary. Put it in the minutes. I'm calling for an emergency vote to suspend all enforcement actions against Lot 17 pending legal review. The secretary looked terrified, but she typed it. Denise grabbed her purse. You will regret this. That was the last thing she said before walking out. But she did not get the dramatic exit she wanted. Because as she reached the door, Mrs. Alvarez spoke again. Henry would have forgiven you if you had told the truth. Denise stopped, but she did not turn around. For one brief moment, her shoulders dropped. Not enough to make me pity her. Not enough to erase what she had done. But enough to show that somewhere under all that control, she knew exactly what she had become. Then she left. The weeks that followed were not magic. Real life almost never wraps itself up cleanly. There were lawyers, county reviews, angry emails, a long investigation into the HOA's finances. Alan Mercer's development group backed away so fast they acted like they had never heard of Willow Creek. Denise resigned before the recall vote could happen, but not before the board released a statement admitting that enforcement against my property had been improper. My fines were canceled. The flag stayed. And one Saturday morning, something happened that I will never forget. I walked outside with a cup of coffee, ready to raise the flag like my grandfather used to. But I stopped on the porch. People were standing along the sidewalk. Mrs. Alvarez was there. Tom was there. The man who had told me to just put up a new flag was there too, holding his little boy's hand and looking embarrassed. Nobody said much at first. Then Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward and handed me a neatly folded flag. It is new, she said softly. But we saved part of the old one. She pointed to a small framed piece of faded cloth in her other hand. For inside the house, she said. So Henry is still here. I could not speak, so I just nodded. Together, we lowered the old flag with care. Not because Denise had won, not because anyone had erased it, but because it had done its job. It had stood through my grandfather's life. It had stood through his death. It had stood through the woman who tried to shame it. And now, it had brought the truth back into the open. As the new flag rose up the pole, the morning wind caught it and spread it wide above the yard. For the first time since I moved into that house, Willow Creek did not feel like a place trying to push me out. It felt like home. I looked at the flag, then at the neighbors standing quietly in the sun, and I finally understood what my grandfather had been trying to teach me. Some things are not worth fighting over because they are old. They are worth fighting for because they remind people who they were before fear, pride, and greed made them forget.